The UK Green Party is currently embroiled in something of a personality crisis as it tries to work out which direction it will go in. One of NIMBYism and protection of wildlife from any kind of building or the like, or a slightly more populist, socialist, one might say, route of trying to combine concern about climate crisis with social and economic injustices too. So at present, there is a leadership election in the Green Party of England and Wales. I believe earlier I said the UK Green Party. That is technically not true. The Scottish Green Party has now kind of officially disaffiliated from the Green Party of England and Wales a couple of years ago now. But there is a leadership election in the Green Party, which has led to something of an ongoing identity crisis, which has existed within the Green Party for quite some years, coming to the fore in a way which very much places a fork in the road, I think, is a phrase that one of the election videos uses. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So for a bit of context, I guess, the Green Party has been a force in British politics in some form or another, since 1970s, I think I'm right in saying. It originally was called the People? It was originally the People Party in the 70s. And gradually became the Green Party, very much sort of falling in line with the naming conventions of Green parties in other countries, right? It has sort of become an established thing, particularly in European countries, that, you know, alongside having a conservative party of some description, alongside having a blank national party, alongside having some sort of Labour Party or Socialist Party, that, you know, any respectable European democracy should have a blank Green Party. And its influence has always been somewhat marginal. I think that is fair to say. That is not to suggest that the best foot wasn't being put forward. But in a system wherein, you know, the two main political parties have generally A, held power, or B, generally held the momentum of British politics, it has been hard for a smaller, more focused maybe on a particular set of issues and policies party to break through. Many of you will know, those of you who live here certainly, those of you who live in other countries may also know, the UK has a first-past-the-post election system, which means that in any given constituency, during a general election, whoever gets the most votes wins. So if, which leads to a situation where there is a lot of tactical voting that goes on, because if you're not super keen on the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, but you really don't like the Conservative Party, you are kind of motivated to maybe vote Labour, even if you might want to vote for the Green Party, because if you do vote for the Green Party, it doesn't matter if the number of votes that the Labour Party and the Green Party had together is more than the Conservatives. The Conservative Party still gets the seat. Different to, for example, the system currently being used in the New York mayoral primaries, whereby everyone is, you kind of rank your choices, and that leads to really interesting scenarios where, for example, Zoran Mamdani and Michael Blake, who are two sort of broadly progressive candidates, have like cross-endorsed one another because they want to push Andrew Cuomo down the list. So it's not the case that there are not tactics that happen in other election systems. However, the first past the post system does generally tend to push smaller parties out. However, as things stand, it feels like the dice are very much in the air for the UK political system. The Reform Party have been making quite the rise in polling. As things stand, according to YouGov's polling, at least, this is as of the 9th, the Reform Party, which is what used to be called the Brexit Party, it is somewhat to the right of the Conservatives, and in fact we'll talk a little bit about the Reform Party later on this evening. The Reform Party is currently sitting at 29% in the polls, ahead of Labour at 23%, and the Conservatives have been dropping off for some time. They're now sitting at 17%. And that has sort of consistently been the case for some months now. Reform's kind of eclipsing of the Conservatives seems to have become more and more sure. But on top of that, Reform leading the Labour Party. And this is and a third party polling ahead of both of the kind of default parties of power is something which hasn't happened for some time. In fact, you would have to go back to the early 20th century when the main political parties in the UK were the Liberals and the Conservatives. And gradually, over a number of elections, the Labour Party, this kind of party of the working class movement, the party of the trade union movement, gradually managed to overtake the Liberal Party as the kind of more the option to the left of the Conservatives, at least. They also had quite a different maybe political philosophy to the Liberals, but if you're kind of looking at that as being two things. And what we're kind of seeing at the moment happen is a similar thing on the political right. The Reform Party, after quite a protracted struggle between first UKIP and then the Brexit Party and now Reform, kind of really trying to break through and take the Conservatives' place, even as like a viable political party. And what sort of happened is, there's an old quote about how, is it Oscar Wilde that said, you go bankrupt first very slowly and then very quickly? The Conservative Party has lost its kind of electoral momentum very slowly, glacially slowly over a couple of decades, and then very quickly. And so this kind of throws the dice of British politics up in the air to some extent, and has maybe made some people feel as though, well, maybe the same thing could happen to the Labour Party as well. And, you know, this might present an opportunity for smaller parties on the left to do a similar thing. I'm not so sold, maybe, that that's something that is likely. Maybe it's possible. I'm not necessarily sold it's something that's particularly likely. But that kind of shaking up of what is seen to be possible is something that certain elements of the Green Party, which we'll get to, have been keen to kind of draw on that energy, I guess. We have some discussion. So Bloink says at this point, bringing back Corbyn would be more popular than Starmer. I think Keir Starmer is an interesting case in that I assumed that it was apparent to everyone that the Labour Party didn't really win the 2024 election. The Conservative Party lost it, right? And the Labour Party happened to be there with Keir Starmer at its head to kind of pick up the pieces from that and to kind of benefit from the collapse of the Tories. I'm not sure Keir Starmer and those at the top of the Labour Party got the memo. Seeing the way that they've governed, seeing the way that they've done their messaging since the election, I think they might have accidentally believed their own hype, which is dangerous, right? But the other thing that's been happening in the Green Party is that a long-standing kind of fracture within the party has begun to come to a head, particularly as some people within the party have seen the opportunity to. They would like to think, kind of take a similar approach to reform and kind of come around the Labour Party that way on the left. Because the Green Party has always had something of a personality crisis. It is both a party which broadly exists to the left of the Labour Party, and as a result, during times of disaffection with the Labour Party, has been able to absorb some left-wing votes from maybe voters who might vote for the Labour Party otherwise, because they are they're sort of broadly left-wing. They would like to, and maybe the Labour Party isn't their sort of ideological home, but they would much rather see the Labour Party in power than the Conservatives, and so will kind of, hold their nose, roll their eyes, and vote Labour anyway. But during certain periods, the Labour Party to those voters becomes just too toxic to support. So, for example, Iraq War, most of those voters would have been like, no, we're not interested in the Labour Party right now. Or, for example, right now, where Keir Starmer's Labour Party is pursuing a lot of policies which feel, at the very least, culturally quite right-wing. They are very much leaning into anti-immigrant sentiment. They have been glacially slow to act in response to the genocide in Gaza. At the moment, we're unsure officially to what extent the UK has been, is, and will be not only responding to the conflict between Israel and Iran, but also participating in it. And so suddenly, the Labour Party, even for those people who don't see it as an ideological home, but might have held their noses going to vote for it, suddenly those people start looking somewhere else. In fact, the Green Party got its first MP in 2008, which would have been during the sort of dying years of the, not only are we kind of mid-credit crunch at that point, it's also during the sort of dying years of the Blair and then Gordon Brown administration. But there's always been this kind of fracture in the Green Party between what I'm gonna call, and I sort of don't mean this too disparagingly, but sort of nice rural liberals who would like to protect England's green and pleasant land, and those kind of left-wing voters for whom the Green Party maybe becomes a home at points where the Labour Party feels too toxic to participate in, to join, to vote for. And so it ends up kind of with this sort of personality crisis. Caroline Lucas, who was the Green Party's first MP back in 2008 and was an MP until 2024, it wasn't until the last election, broadly managed to balance these two things quite well, right? Was both extremely interested in environmental issues, which is always going to be like the staple of the Green Party's platform, but also through the austerity years of the Conservative governments, was very much involved in various anti-austerity movements, right? Any big protest against government cuts, against freezing of teachers' pay, freezing of doctors' pay, all of that kind of stuff, reforms to disability benefits to make that extremely punitive, tuition fees for university students increasing. Caroline Lucas would have been like a fairly standard presence there. But for a number of years, so initially the Green Party used to not have party leaders at all, which came from this idea that, they wanted to be a party that did things differently, and so they didn't want to have party leaders because, that gives a lot of power to one person. But over the years, kind of, I guess, a need to be able to participate in a political system in the UK which is not presidential, but often is kind of presidential, meant that the Green Party ended up having first a leader and then gradually joint party leaders. And this has happened for a number of years now. So can we find like Green Party leaders over the years? So for the past number of rounds, the Green Party has always had two leaders. And this has worked well because it's effectively meant that you can have one leader that's a man and one leader that's a woman, which is kind of a nice sort of twist on the old format, I guess. But also, it's meant that the Green Party has been able to have one leader whose like main business is the slightly I'm trying not to use the word protectionist because I'm not meaning that in the way that anyone uses that phrase, but conservationist. That's the word I'm looking for. That kind of one leader can sort of be the more conservationist face of the party and can speak to that part of the party membership and the party's voting base, but also can speak to those issues in the press, etc. And that the other leader can speak more to the social justice, economic justice kind of portion of both the membership and the voting base. And therefore the party can kind of manage to have a foot in both camps. So the current leaders, as things stand, co-leaders until the leadership election, which is happening this summer, is Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey, who, again, both share a lot in their politics, right? They're both part of the same political party, both committed to environmental issues, tackling the climate crisis, and the social justice and economic justice aspects of it. I wouldn't like to say that either of them sort of don't care about the other thing at all, or that it's not present within their politics. But Carla Denyer has been very much able to speak to the more like left-wing kind of aspect of the party's platform and kind of attract people to the party who might be joining because they are left-wing, and the Labour Party maybe feels like it's not a left-wing party for them anymore, and therefore the Green Party is the party to which they get absorbed, and sort of like urban voters as well, right? So she won a seat which, to be honest, Bristol Central had been teetering towards becoming a Green seat for a very long time. Until the last election, the Green Party had Brighton Pavilion, I believe, that Caroline Lucas was MP for a very long time, and Bristol kind of being the UK's other lefty liberal city meant that it had been teetering for a long, long time. It had been one of vanishingly few seats in the UK that had been a seat where the competition was between the Labour Party and the Green Party. And that is true with the council in Bristol in many places too. And 2025 was the year in which it kind of finally happened, which I don't think was a massive surprise. The Labour Party MP, Thangam Debonair, who had been MP for quite some time, was very much on the right wing of the Labour Party, and it sort of seemed like a strange choice to keep her running there, if I'm honest, particularly given that the city was is like reasonably left wing in terms of the UK. In fact, I think under Jeremy Corbyn, I think I'm right in saying that Bristol Central, Thangam Debonair managed to gain 15,000 votes, because even where the Labour Party might have struggled in other places, in Bristol, they were like, hey, Jeremy Corbyn, woo. And so at the last election, that seat did go to Carla Denyer. And then something interesting happened. As the leadership election approached, what was often billed as a kind of shock sort of result, or shock announcement, I guess, which I don't know how true or fair that is. Is it Zach Polanski, who is a member of the London Assembly, which is, I don't know, I guess if the mayor of London is like the president of London, the London Assembly is kind of the Parliament of London. Zach Polanski, who had been elected the deputy leader last time around, announced that he was going to try and oust the current leaders, Carla Denyer and Adrian Ramsey. Since then, Carla Denyer has decided to step down as leader. She is not running for re-election. And so instead, Adrian Ramsey is running on a joint ticket with Ellie Chowns, which would continue the sort of, it's not tradition because it's not been happening for long enough, but the sort of convention that has existed over the past few leadership rounds of the Green Party having co-leaders, one being a man, one being a woman. However, it kind of sees things begin to flatten a little bit, in that both Adrian Ramsey and Ellie Chowns are rural, I think I'm correct in saying, MPs who exist very much on that NIMBY side of the party, and it places them in direct conflict with Zach Polanski's campaign. And Zach is a member of the London Assembly, so a very city politician, who has kind of staked his entire campaign, really, on making the Green Party a much more openly, unashamedly, enthusiastically left-wing party. We find that kind of personality crisis of the Green Party really splitting open in ways which are really interesting, not just for the Green Party, which at the last general election ended up with 4 members of parliament, which, considering prior to this they'd only ever had 1, and that had kind of been the ceiling for some time, right? Carolyn Lucas had been first elected in 2008 and had sort of continued to be the only MP for almost 20 years. Well, okay, maybe like 16 years. So you kind of get to that point where you've still got one MP and you've not gone backwards, but you maybe don't have momentum in quite the same way. So the party is a bigger force in British politics than it once was, fourfold. But also, with the Labour Party really struggling, and the Labour Party in the polls, and the Labour Party very much shifting to the right under Keir Starmer, partly in an attempt to chase off the Reform Party, a more enthusiastically left-wing Green Party could manage to soak up some votes. Maybe not enough to be some sort of surprise majority, but enough for it to be more than a little bit notable. So Zach Polanski launched his campaign with a YouTube video, which also got shared on social media, because how else does one launch a political campaign these days? Explicitly looking at the idea of transforming the party into what he's called an eco-populist party.
The Labour government is failing and the planet is burning. People are looking for somewhere to turn. Nigel Farage and his billionaire mates, they don't offer any real solutions. It's time to rise up. It's time for bold action. And that's why I'm running, to be the next leader of the Green Party. We all know we need a party that is bolder, clearer about what it is that we stand for, and crucially, what we will always stand against. A party that can cut.
So, Andrew Matthews has just said in the chat, isn't this the hypnotist? Okay, yeah, we do also have to. So, the thing we will come to is that he was at one point. Not hypnotists. He was at one point a hypnotist who. So the story is, or the way the story gets told, is that he performed hypnotherapy to enlarge women's breasts. This is Tom Swarbrick, who is I've only ever seen him saying reasonably right-wing things, so I'm going to describe him as being at least mildly right-wing. Someone who has both the time in their day and the stomach to listen to LBC more might be able to tell me otherwise. But my understanding of the situation, having looked into it, is that effectively someone from the Sun newspaper, but at the very least a journalist, signed up for here we go, it was the Sun, a journalist from the Sun that kind of went undercover and was like, can you do this? Like, that it was their suggestion, and he was like, okay, but that his approach was like, how can I make this person feel better about their body, right? That's my understanding of it. Whether that can kind of like kill the story, like whether the fact that there is a slightly less than totally bonkers explanation for it that one can find maybe doesn't mean that it's not something that, if he were to become leader, would come up a million times.
Through. Not just to those who already agree, but to millions more people. A party that knows inequality is at the heart of all of our problems. Town, village, country, city, wherever you live, inequality hurts us all. A party that will confront fascism and will call a genocide exactly what it is. Now is the moment to build the next generation. New faces, new names, new voices. This is how we'll win. We can beat reform, win more councillors, and send more Green MPs.
So, I think it's worth saying that this isn't to say that these things are wrong in any way, but, he's kind of ticking the left-wing boxes. He's kind of getting those people on board. And there is also an implicit kind of attack on... I don't know whether you can say that the Green Party has an establishment, because it is like the fifth biggest party in British politics. Like, I don't know how it feels like you have to be reasonably big to have an establishment, but you know, there are veiled, less than veiled attacks in there of the old guard, at least we should say, in all of these kind of shout outs to be getting new faces in.
Inequality is at the heart of all of our problems. Town, village, country, city, wherever you live, inequality hurts us all. A party that will confront fascism and will call a genocide exactly what it is. Now is the moment to build the next generation. New faces, new names, new voices. This is how we'll win. We can beat reform, win more councillors, and send more Green MPs to Parliament. Because we know how to...
Look, I think it can be a good edit, right? This is, this is one of less than 20 political campaigns in Britain over the last 20 years which have had a gimbal. That's real high-tech stuff for British politics, is a politician who knows someone who owns a gimbal.
Win now, but it's time to aim higher. There are 39 constituencies where we came second place to an increasingly unpopular Labour government, and many more constituencies where we are growing every single day. This is only the beginning. People are crying out for the Green Party to seize this moment. A nature and climate crisis, racist riots on our streets.
Ed Davey would be on a roller coaster. So I think, if I go to my grave having been underappreciated for anything, it will be the time that Keir Starmer did a big announcement about the fact that Universal Studios were going to be building a theme park in the UK. And I tweeted something along the lines of, really parking tanks on Ed Davey's lawn here, which I thought was really funny, but it didn't like the Van Gogh of tweets well, I guess I would be the Van Gogh, and the tweet would be the sunflowers. But by which I mean underappreciated in my lifetime.
Inequality growing deeper every day. It is time for bold leadership. When I say bold, I mean bold. For years, I've debated some of the toughest interviewers. And when I say leadership, I mean real leadership. I've seen the difference when you can help empower communities by listening and inspiring people to work together. That's why I'll always use my platform to lift other people up on our estates, in our workplaces, in our faith spaces. We can have environmental, social, racial, and economic justice if we unite, and the Green Party will be the united force for change. Join us for bold leadership now.
So it's interesting, in the chat, a lot of discussion, and I know this is something that I've talked about a lot lately, has been politicians being good at social media or not. Spencer talking about Zoran Mamdani, who has been doing some really fantastic stuff during the New York mayoral campaign, and just putting out just really good, just really strong social media content, whether that's on YouTube or whether it's just stuff for Twitter and Instagram and all of that. Stuff that just looks really good, but not only is slick in terms of production value, is also fun, which I think is really hard to do. I think I sit where the rest of, where a decent number of people in the chat are sitting. I think this is good. I don't know, I don't know. I don't know whether it's as catchy as I would say that Robert Jenrick, who is not the leader of the Conservative Party, but would like to be the leader of the Conservative Party, as I've kind of talked about last week, I think, he's currently doing Mamdani-style, very good social media stuff. And I'm not sure this quite gets to that level, however much it might aspire to do so. And so Polanski has very much been pushing for this kind of what he's calling eco-populist. What he really kind of means by that is eco-socialist, I guess. But his goal is to kind of do a similar thing on the left that he sees the Reform Party doing on the right. I would suggest that to think that the thing that the Reform Party doing has been quite sudden in terms of its insurgency in taking over the Conservatives as the kind of default conservative right-wing party of British politics. I would say that that's actually been the full stop on a process that has been taking place for decades and decades. I can sort of see where he's coming from, right? Embrace the narrative. If we are indeed living through a period where the two-party system is falling apart before our very eyes, why not embrace that and run with it, right? Particularly, there's kind of a whole generation of voters who were kind of politicized during the Jeremy Corbyn sort of years of the Labour Party, which I think, Zach Polanski is looking at sweeping up. And a generation of activists, I think, as much as a generation of voters, maybe, that potentially you can have a rejuvenated Green Party with boots on the ground and people who can make videos that maybe are even slicker than this one. I was also looking at this clip of him speaking at a rally. This was a sort of anti-cuts rally that happened, anti-government cuts rally that happened a few weeks ago, or maybe 1 week ago, maybe a bit.
Thank you. Friends, there are over 300,000 people in this country sleeping homeless. There are 2.3 million people using food banks. There are over 3 million people living in fuel poverty. And Keir Starmer, his response? It's time to make difficult decisions. Why are these always difficult decisions for children living in poverty? Why are they always difficult decisions for disabled people, for migrants? Why are they not difficult decisions for multimillionaires, for billionaires, for fossil fuel giants, for unscrupulous landlords? It is time to tax the rich.
Kind of inequality, economic injustice is very much at the heart of this campaign and kind of looking to sweep up some of that. I mean, we've also in recent kind of months, we've sort of seen Gary Stevenson's book come out about the trading game, which kind of opened up a bit of a conversation around wealth taxes, and kind of his YouTube stuff has been getting been doing decent views, right? There is clearly an audience and maybe voters out there who are interested in inequality, not only as a matter of like you should be paid more, but also as a matter of what happens to a society in which some people can get so disproportionately wealthy that they have so much of a sway over politics, but also over like things like taxation, because you can just go, well, if you tax me too much, I'm going to go. Like, that's a society that has all of its eggs in one basket, and the eggs might just sort of go. And, that's often an argument that is used for not taxing rich people more, is that they might leave. But, like, that is kind of that's kind of why you need to stop inequality getting to such a place in the first place, because you end up with a situation where someone can do that. Whereas even if you have rich people, but you have thousands of them, it's much harder for one of them just go like, I'm going to go. And there is less truth to the idea that all the rich people are leaving anyway. There was a kind of a story that did the rounds that lots and lots of all the rich people were leaving the UK, that turned out to be a sort of tax company that were kind of talking about it, or like financial planners talking about it. The reality is that sort of nothing of the sort has happened anyway. But what's been as interesting, in some ways more interesting to my mind than Zach's campaign, has been the response by Ellie Chown and Adrian Ramsey, who I guess at this point are representing the kind of slightly more old school approach of the Green Party. A little bit less tub thumping, or a lot less tub thumping, maybe. A little bit more like nice liberals, but could have a lengthy conversation with your conservative uncle, and find a lot in common with them. Sort of, yeah, Evie saying a little bit more status quo. But let's see what their response has been, because I think, like, to my mind, this is even more interesting than the sort of political content of Zach's campaign.
We stand at a crossroads between the politics of fear and division and the politics of hope and real vision.
To challenge the rise of the far right and show the way to that greener, fairer future, we need our party to be a credible political force.
We do need to do sort of political campaigning video. Don't do a walk and talk challenge.
To build an unstoppable movement for positive change.
Accelerating climate breakdown, nature in dangerous decline.
Sorry,
Public
it does briefly make it sound like that's one of his policies. What do we stand for? Accelerating climate breakdown.
Climate breakdown, nature in dangerous decline. Public services on their knees. Deepening poverty while billionaires become even wealthier.
We know that a better world is only possible if enough people vote for it.
We've come so far since Carla and I became co-leaders, winning a step change in our number of councillors to over 850 seats.
And winning 4 seats here in Parliament, including seats like mine and Adrian's that many thought were unwinnable. The huge progress we've already made is all down to you. So thank you for everything you've done, leafleting, knocking on doors, standing for election, supporting candidates, serving in office. Thank you.
Winning elections is about inspiring people who've previously voted for other parties to place their trust in us. And that's how the Green Party will win even bigger.
The old parties are crumbling fast. After the next general election,
so like there's like it touches upon similar things occasionally. Inequality is in there. The idea that the old political system is falling apart and that the Greens might be able to sweep up is in there as well. And yet there is very much a focus on, a steady hand on the tiller. Someone said in the chat, adults in the room.
Green MPs could hold the balance of power.
We need our leaders to be here in Westminster, at the heart of politics, with the mandate to bring transformational change, for the voices that go unheard, for a livable future.
Everything we've achieved together. And Adrian and I know we can achieve so much more. That's why we're asking you to put your trust in us. because together we win.
It's very head teachers, you know? It's very welcome to our sort of school open day. Please send your children to our rural primary school. The vicar comes in every Friday to do assembly. We do a trip to London once a year. Look at the wonderful field we have. We only actually have 30 children at this primary school, and very countryphile, Egg says, yes, yeah. And so it's very much like, you know, focus on them being MPs is clearly the thing they want to focus on, which, to be fair, is kind of their sort of distinction from Zach, is that Zach is a member of the London Assembly, which, you know, is less prestigious, is less notable than being a member of Parliament. But effectively what we've ended up with is, I think the New Statesman, I think, describes them as eco-centrists. The New Statesman, to be clear, probably not using the idea of them being centrists as any kind of negative at all. The New Statesman would love it to be would love the Green Party to be sort of Change UK, the independent group. And this very much has been the focus of this election. It's been particularly interesting to see, because when kind of say that they're running, their platform is one of kind of ecocentrism, it is very much the case that they are running on a platform of sort of ecocentrism in response to Zach Polanski's kind of quote-unquote eco-populist approach, his slightly more brazenly left-wing approach, which is intriguing to see so early on the election campaign be led by the insurgent campaigner. That rather than Adrian Ramsey, who is currently one of the co-leaders of the Green Party, Ellie Chound, who is a member of Parliament, that they are having to respond to an election narrative that is being set by the kind of challenger candidate. And very much, you know, what they're running their campaign on is that, you know, we're in Parliament. I spoke in the House of Commons 5 times yesterday on a range of topics. Ellie Chound, the Green MP for North West Herefordshire, told me when we met on a drab evening at a cafe in St James's Park. We as Greens have got a much stronger voice in Parliament, speaking day in, day out on issues that really matter. And it very much feels like the pitch here is that we can be a limited yet stable voice in... Zach Polanski might throw things up in the air, right? That there's a gamble there. There's this pitch to kind of run down the left wing and try and see who one can, see what one can sweep up. But the fear amongst the Adrian Ramseys and the Ellie Chounds is that, you know, that throws everything up in the air and maybe everything smashes when it lands, rather than being, I don't know where the metaphor is going, lands well and comfortably. But what's interesting is that Ellie Chounds and Adrian Ramsey seem to be maybe operating under some similar illusions to that which Keir Starmer has been operating under. In that, it seems like... So Adrian Ramsey, as I've already said, is currently one of the co-leaders of the Green Party. The fact that I've told you that means that you are more aware of who Adrian Ramsey is than 99.99999% of British voters. His media presence has been effectively zero. Carla Denyer, who is his co-leader, has been much more present, has been much more successful at cutting through, comes across quite well. Ellie Challenge and Adrian Ramsey seem to be operating under the false illusion that they kind of won 4 seats in the last general election, rather than the last general election having just been this big chaotic election in which the Conservative Party absolutely imploded, and there were kind of seats that fell into people's laps. I think you would be really pushing it to say that in the same way that Keir Starmer didn't really actively win the election, he kind of just managed to sweep up the Conservatives' implosion. I would suggest that a similar thing happened to the Green Party at the last election. Ellie Challenge and Adrian Ramsey trying to kind of trade off their existing success feels itself like a display of not being particularly aware of why they're in Parliament. And I mean, I don't know how fragile their position in Parliament is, and whether there's a world where the Green Parties just very quickly go back down to 2 seats. There's going to be local campaigning that has helped as well. I think looking at the last election and trying to read too much like I did X and then Y into it in a context where there was just so much to gain from the Conservatives imploded and everything went up in the air, I think is I don't know, I think it's too easy, I don't know, to see agency where there is not any. Like, I don't like to say that there is, like, I don't know, that the Green Party does not have free will. And I think it's going to be really, I think whichever way this goes, it's going to be fascinating to watch kind of what comes out the other side. If the Green Party does become this kind of campaigning, bombastic, eco-socialist party out the other end, the questions will be, can they sweep up all of those kind of left-wing voters that they would like to be able to, and how does that tally with any of those nice rural liberals that they might lose? Also, how does that interact with the fact that Jeremy Corbyn has continued to talk about launching a new party? This has been something that he's been talking about, him and his people have been talking about for a long, long time. And it's been sort of like coming for a while. If Jeremy Corbyn does launch a party, there will be some left-wing voters who will flock to whatever that is, right? There are some people on the left who are very much who are bought into the cult of personality of Jeremy Corbyn, and therefore, if he launches a thing, will flock to that thing. I don't know how sizable that kind of group of people is. Yeah, I think he's talked about, like, is it actually going to be a political party? Is it going to be like some other kind of thing? It's a political party, isn't it? I don't know. It's a bit like sometimes local councils will have like an independent grouping, and you're like, okay, but At what point is this not a political party? But equally, the other way around, right? If Ellie Chowns and Adrian Ramsey do win, what happens to all the left-wing energy that is currently flooding into the Green Party? Because I think it's fair to say, so there's particularly been a group called Greens Organise, which has been doing a lot of work in terms of not only galvanising left-wing support, which is already present within the Green Party, but also, you know, inviting people who are on the left to kind of to join the Greens to push them to the left, right, and to really build that side of the Green Party. If Zach Blatty doesn't win, what happens to all that that kind of left energy? And also what happens to the Green Party, right? Do they end up being a sort of Lib Dem type force where they are an option for nice liberals who, for whatever reason, at any given point, are not happy with the Labour Party or the Lib Dems? As much as the UK has kind of shifted to the right reasonably rapidly over the past couple of years. But yeah, so how this goes forward is going to be really interesting because yeah, there is a lot of energy there and I think there is also a lot of energy for that kind of for like parliamentary politics. From that, for a kind of left-wing parliamentary party, the challenge of all of this is that whatever happens to the Green Party, what happens to that new party, the UK still has a first past the post system, which doesn't love having a million different parties. It very much favours two parties kind of being the main party and everyone else sort of being a kind of protest party, as it were. I think one of the things that often gets missed, and maybe the real opportunity for the Greens or whoever it is actually that long-term work. I think it is slightly... I think, as I said earlier, it is slightly naive to think that what reform has done has been to win power very quickly and to overturn things very quickly. I think the result might happen very quickly. And yet, actually, that has been decades in the making, right? Thank you so much for watching this clip from one of my Monday night live shows. If you'd like to watch more of these clips, but ad and sponsor free, then you can do so over on my premium streaming service, Nebula. Whilst you're over there, you can also watch my debut feature-length film, Boomers, and my Nebula exclusive class, How to Research Like a PhD Student. And it's not just exclusive stuff from me that you can find over there. We've got exclusive films and shows from many of your absolute favourite creators. Our goal with Nebula has been to build a platform where we are less reliant on third-party enterprises like Google and YouTube, and where we can really build ambitious projects that creators like myself and others that are involved are really excited by. If you'd like to support that mission, then you can do so by signing up using my link, go.nebula.tv/Tom Nicholas. That'll get you 40% off an annual subscription to Nebula, and also we get a little kickback to support our work too. So that link again is go.nebula.tv/Tom Nicholas. Thanks so much for watching once again, and I'll see you over on Nebula.